The polished marble floors of Richardson Tower gleamed under fluorescent lights as Marcus Williams pushed his cleaning cart down the empty executive hallway. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday, and most of the building's employees had long since gone home to their families. Marcus didn't mind the solitude. In fact, he preferred it. The quiet gave him time to think about his daughter, Emma, who was likely finishing her homework at their neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment right about now. Marcus had been working as a janitor at Richardson Tower for 3 years, ever since his wife Sarah had passed away from cancer. The medical bills had wiped out their savings, forcing them to sell their small house in the suburbs. Now, he and 8-year-old Emma lived in a cramped one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx, where he slept on a fold-out couch and gave Emma the only bedroom. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, and Marcus made sure Emma never went to bed hungry or without clean clothes for school. The executive floor was always his last stop of the night. As he approached the conference room, he noticed the lights were still on. Voices drifted through the half-open door, followed by laughter. Marcus hesitated, then knocked gently. "Come in," a voice called out. Inside, 5 men in expensive suits sat around the massive mahogany table, surrounded by empty pizza boxes and beer bottles. Marcus recognized James Richardson, the CEO, a silver-haired man in his 60s who rarely acknowledged the cleaning staff. The others were executives Marcus had seen, but never spoken to. "Sorry to interrupt, sir," Marcus said quietly. "I can come back later to clean." No, come in," Richardson said, gesturing with his hand. He'd clearly had a few drinks. "We're just celebrating closing the Henderson deal, biggest acquisition in company history." Marcus nodded politely and began emptying the trash bins, trying to be invisible as the men continued their conversation. That's when he noticed it. A beautiful grand piano sitting in the corner of the room. He'd cleaned this conference room 100 times, but had never seen it before. Having it delivered was supposed to be a surprise for tomorrow's shareholder meeting, one of the executives explained, noticing Marcus's gaze. "Some entertainment while they wait? We hired a pianist, but he canceled last minute. Now it's just sitting there useless. Shame." Another executive chimed in, emboldened by alcohol. "Hey, I bet even the janitor here could. Play better than nothing." He looked at Marcus with a smirk. "What do you say, buddy? Know how to tickle the ivories?" The room erupted in laughter. Marcus felt his face flush, but he maintained his composure. He'd learned long ago that responding to mockery only made things worse. "Actually," Marcus said quietly, "I do play a little." The laughter died down, replaced by surprised expressions. The executive who'd made the joke leaned back in his chair, grinning. "Well then, let's hear it. Show us what you've got." Marcus glanced at his watch. He should finish his rounds and get home to Emma. Mrs. Chen charged by the hour, and every extra minute meant less money for groceries. But something in James Richardson's eyes caught his attention. Unlike the others, the CEO wasn't smiling. He looked tired, almost sad despite the celebration around him. "All right," Marcus said, setting down his cleaning supplies. "Just one song." He walked to the piano and sat down on the bench, his janitorial uniform a stark contrast to the instrument's elegance. For a moment, his hands hovered over the keys, and he was transported back 15 years. He could see Sarah in her wedding dress, could feel the joy of that day when he'd played at their reception, back when he'd been a music teacher at a public school, before the budget cuts, before the cancer, before everything fell apart. Marcus closed his eyes and began to play. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat. Major filled the room like water pouring into an empty vessel. His fingers moved across the keys with practiced grace, each note precise yet filled with emotion. The melody was melancholic and beautiful, speaking of love and loss, of dreams deferred and memories cherished. The laughter in the room had completely vanished. The executives sat frozen, their smiles fading as the music washed over them. Marcus poured everything into the performance. Every sleepless night worrying about making rent. Every parent-teacher conference where Emma's teachers praised her despite the odds. Every morning he'd kissed his daughter goodbye and promised her things would get better. The music became a prayer, a protest, a love letter to everyone who'd ever struggled to keep going. When he transitioned into his own improvisation, blending the classical piece with jazz elements Sarah had loved, something broke open in the room. James Richardson's eyes glistened with unshed tears. One of the other executives quietly wiped his face with his sleeve. Marcus played for 7 minutes, though it felt like both seconds and hours. When the final note faded into silence, nobody moved. The only sound was the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system. Finally, James Richardson stood up. His face was wet with tears he made no effort to hide. That was... The CEO's voice cracked. That was the most beautiful thing I've heard in 30 years. He walked closer to Marcus, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. Where did you learn to play like that? I was a music teacher, Marcus said simply. Before? Before what? Marcus hesitated, then decided there was no point in hiding. Before my wife got sick. The medical bills, the debt, I took whatever work I could find. This job has good health insurance for my daughter. That's what matters. Richardson was quiet for a long moment. Do you have children, Marcus? A daughter. Emma, she's 8. The CEO nodded slowly, fresh tears forming in his eyes. I have a daughter too, Rebecca. She's 26 now. He sat down heavily, in one of the conference room chairs. I haven't spoken to her in 3 years. She told me I chose my company over my family, and she was right. I missed her recitals, her graduation, her engagement. I was always too busy closing deals, making money, building an empire. He looked up at Marcus. Tonight was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my career, but all I could think about was how my daughter won't return my calls. The other executives shifted uncomfortably, but Richardson continued. And then you played that piano. A man who's lost so much, who works 2 shifts to provide for his child, who still has beauty and grace in his soul. You made me realize what a fool I've been. Marcus didn't know what to say. The raw emotion in the CEO's voice was startling, humbling. Richardson stood up and extended his hand. Thank you, Marcus, truly. As they shook hands, Marcus gathered his cleaning supplies, ready to finish his shift. But Richardson stopped him. Wait, what would it take for you to come back to teaching? I can't afford to, Marcus said honestly. Teaching doesn't pay enough for Emma's needs, our rent, everything. I wish I could, but this is my reality. Richardson pulled out his phone and made a call right then and there. Robert, James Richardson. I need you to look into something. For me first thing tomorrow morning. He looked at Marcus. What school did you teach at? Over the next hour, as Marcus tried to politely continue his work, Richardson made several calls. The other executives, sobered by the turn of events, quietly left. By the time Marcus finished cleaning, Richardson had drafted an offer on his personal letterhead. I'm creating a position, the CEO explained. Director of Arts Education for the Richardson Foundation. You'll work with underprivileged schools across the city, teaching music, training other teachers, providing instruments to kids who can't afford them. The salary is triple what you're making now, full benefits, and flexible hours so you can be there for Emma. Marcus stared at the paper, unable to speak. It felt like a dream, like something that happened to other people. I can't accept this, he finally said. It's too much. You don't even know if I'm qualified. Anyone who can play like that, who can raise a daughter, alone while working nights and still have hope in their heart, that person is qualified for anything, Richardson interrupted. Besides, you'll be doing me a favor. That foundation has been sitting there for tax purposes. You'll actually make it mean something. 3 months later, Marcus stood in front of 30 students at the same underprivileged school where he used to teach. Emma sat in the front row, beaming with pride as her father demonstrated a chord progression. The classroom was filled with donated instruments, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt like he was exactly where he belonged. James Richardson was there too, sitting quietly in the back. He'd been attending Marcus's classes regularly, sometimes bringing his daughter Rebecca, with whom he was slowly rebuilding a relationship. After class, as students packed up their instruments, Richardson approached Marcus. Thank you, the CEO said again, as he'd said so many times over the past months. You gave me more than music that night. You gave me perspective. Marcus smiled, watching Emma carefully put away a violin. We saved each other, he said simply. That's what people do when they really see each other. Outside the classroom windows, the afternoon sun painted the city in golden light. And somewhere in the building, a child practiced scales on a donated piano, filling the world with the possibility of beauty, the promise of second chances, and the enduring truth that kindness, once witnessed, can change everything.